Circa Sunday Millions, week 2 on a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday. It is Sharky Waters Nation. I'm Rich Lifestyle. Ride the wave, get out of the water. It is Sunday, September 18th, 2022. As we turn the music down, it is the Shark. It is the Gun. It is the Odds Fellow. It is an opportunity to dominate top plays, hype, analysis, and chat. Guns picks. What's going on this morning, my brother?
Dude, I'm feeling good, especially after a great week 1. As a group, we just killed it. We absolutely crushed the board. I was 8-4 last week in week 1. I started 2-0 this week, hit the Thursday night plays, 2-play special, and I'm starting 10-4 year to date. And I'm going to be cooking all the way through week 2. Pass it to my man, the Odds Fellas. How you feeling, my friend?
Glorious Sunday. The music goes down, but we come up. Had a great weekend. Really enjoyed Sunday. Then I sucked Monday and Thursday. You know what that means? I'm due. A little bit of regression, baby. Let's cook.
Let's do it.
Absolutely not waiting around. Let some people file in the door here. We're about 200 on Twitter. Follow our YouTube page, Dad Bods, as well for that as we grow the channel across multiple platforms. We said Heinz Field. We're not going to Heinz Field. We're going to Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. The Buy Hat is engaged for the first time in this broadcast. A 3-way collab play. Anthony Latino, New England Patriots, road game 2. Off a dud in Miami, traveling to Pittsburgh, where they are historically excellent, an official play.
Yeah, I mean, this was one we talked about for the contest. We did get it officially in the contest at -2. This is going to be the tricky thing here as we navigate the show and the season, but we'll try to be transparent. We'll try to get these out. Lines differ from game to game. This thing opened much lower. I think it was around -1.5. That thing has come flying up to 2.5 on Friday, which is when I bet it, which is why I grabbed the money line, -135. I know Guns got an earlier line. It's got some spots. I do like it up to 3, but just a little bit of added protection there. You really look at what these two offenses did in week 1, and they both looked abysmal. But under the hood, under the radar, that Pats front 7 actually got pressure, stopped the rush, slowed the Miami offense a little bit. That game really should have been out of hand. Maybe some of that was Tua. Maybe some of that was the rush stopping. But you couple that with TJ Watt getting hurt here late in the fourth quarter of the Steelers win. Okay. They're still banged up on the offensive line. They still want to run the ball to protect Mitch Trubisky, and they're not going to be able to do that against this New England defense. I like this thing to be low scoring, and I like the Pats to get it done. Grab that total at the under for me. Grab the Pats, and I'll turn it over to these guys for some even more in-depth analysis.
Yeah, and I dropped some commentary on this on the show with Jay Money. Shout out to Jay Money. He'll be live in 90 minutes. We know you guys are going to watch that as well. But there's a lot going on here. You have to look at both angles of the game, of course, as always. Go back to last year. Mac Jones, campaign 1, coming out of Alabama. The training wheels were on, but he started 6-0 straight up on the road. So clearly that was an outlier. That was unsustainable. It was going to come the other direction. It had to come the other direction, and it has in a very, very intense way. 4 consecutive road losses. 4 consecutive road blowouts dating back to a 10-point loss at Indianapolis mid to late season last year. Then a blowout loss in Miami, a blowout loss in the playoffs at Buffalo by 30, and another blowout loss last week at Miami. However, anybody who follows the Patriots long-term knows one thing. They cannot play effective football in Miami. Glamorous, traveling, hotels, humidity, whatever the hell it is, they just don't show up. Where do they show up? In Pittsburgh. 13-4 straight up last 17. This is just an environment they function well. Go to the other side of this game, and you look at Pittsburgh last week. Pittsburgh won the game in overtime, 23-20. I mean, this game was in the balance. This could have been won 4 different ways by both teams. It was an absolutely ridiculous game. It was a poorly played game. A bunch of people last week had suggested the Cincinnati Bengals would come out flat with a Super Bowl hangover effect. 4 turnovers in the first half. Hangover it was. Excuse me. However, when you really look at what was going on there, did Pittsburgh do anything? No. Cincinnati handed them the ball 4 times. They scored 1 offensive touchdown in the entire game. And it was essentially just really a poorly played football game. So then you look at that environment, you come back here, and you get the Patriots and the bounce back effect. Strong line on the road. We're at an official at -2 in the millions competition and on Twitter. And I believe Guns Picks also agrees with a hat, a shirt, a fandom, and an official play.
Hey, I went with the Patriots last week and I got burned on it. But when I actually saw that, you see the score, you see 20-7, you go, oh, everybody and their uncle just basically said the pass got murdered. And now it's buy high. You're buying the low on the Patriots right now. Open a box score once in a while and read some stats. That's basically what you see how the game really panned out. So you actually go into the stats a little bit. First downs, they're basically even. Miami had 18 first downs. New England had 17. Net yards, 271 for New England. Miami 307. Time of possession, the only difference about 5 minutes in that game. But the key point to this game, -3 in turnover ratio. That was what basically decided the game, and that's why you see a 20-7 outcome. Now you got to look at the Pittsburgh side. Opposite situation for them. They won the game 23-20 over Cincinnati in overtime with tons and tons of missed field goals. Crazy game, but you actually got destroyed in the net yardage, -165 net yards. They have no TJ Watt in this game. And how do you win a game 23-20 when you were +5 in turnover ratio? I mean, that kind of tells you that the offense is unproductive. Mitch Trubisky is not the guy there. Eventually, you're going to see Kenny Pickett. We may have a different situation at Pittsburgh. But without TJ Watt in that, the heartbeat of that defense, you're going to see a different outcome here. And Shark hit the point here. I got 5-1 against the spread in the last 6 meetings with Pittsburgh. This is a perfect spot for New England at a buy low price. I got them at a pick 'em on Monday, but I like them all the way up to -3. So that's where I'm at right now. New England, pick them, and that's a 2-unit play for me.
Yeah, so of course, if you guys are following this, you can tell we like this play quite a bit. So stay there, dominate, and let's go. Second play, we're going back to Anthony Latino here. 1 o'clock, First Energy Stadium. This is the biggest energy the Cleveland Browns have exhibited since the '93 campaign, where Bill Belichick was the head coach, and I believe Vinny Testaverde was the quarterback, a career journeyman at that point. However, Anthony Latino, Jets traveling to Browns. We're not focused on the ATS side here. We're focused on the total.
I will give you a slight ATS lean, and it's because of that total, because I think this total now sitting at 39.5. Again, another one that probably opened and came down. I did get it at 39.5. It's still sitting there. I like it above that 39. This is going to be a messy game in Cleveland. This is 1 o'clock. This is winds blowing 14, 15 miles an hour. This is two offenses that, again, want to run the ball. Do you think Robert Saleh is taking receipts? Hopefully he said it on live on the New York radio, right? All over the broadcast that he is. I hope he's taking receipts of how many times he let Joe Flacco throw the ball, because he threw the ball over 50 times. And if they want to get back, if they want to protect this offense, if they want to stay in a game and protect that defense that actually played pretty good, albeit against a banged-up Ravens team, didn't cover, but hung in there, especially in the first half, they are going to have to get back to rushing the ball. I don't trust Jacoby Brissett, right? So another team, again, with their 1-2 punch that wants to run the ball. Cleveland, very good defensively. So I like this game to be messy. And what that speaks to is a 39.5 point total on a 6.5 line for me is a slight lean to the Jets. Don't have it official yet. Maybe I'll look in game if they get down and that thing gets inflated, second half play potentially. But again, really think these teams are going to beat each other up. A lot of punching each other in the mouth, and that total goes low. Maybe the Jets keep it tight.
Yeah, and just as a cross-referencing point, when you see the Jets at home last week as a 6.5 point underdog, when you go on the road within the same division and you're a 6.5 point underdog, theoretically, when you take the name off the jersey, this is not Cleveland, this is not Baltimore, just the situation, this is showing more strength to the Jets than it did last week, where, of course, we did have Baltimore, and Baltimore did hammer them. Joe Flacco, going back to the division, he did once dominate, maybe a reach, but certainly play effectively. Sharp look here across the board in this country and world is definitely the Jets. I'm not on it. I do think, as a historical buy low, Cleveland is due to open the season with 2 wins. Of course, that does not mean ATS wins. And laying a touchdown with Jacoby Brissett and the boys in a defensive style of game, you might need a defensive turnover or touchdown here to really get to that spread point, because I don't really see the offense doing a whole lot. That all being said, we're going to go straight back to the gun. Fox Sports, Caesars Superdome. Tom Brady comes in here 0-4 straight up and 0-4 ATS in his Tampa Bay Buccaneers career against divisional rival Saints. Of course, that was Sean Payton, that was Drew Brees, and it was, I believe, Trevor Siemian at one point as well. Tom comes in here, road back-to-back off a win against Dallas, an unimpressive one at that. Guns, picks, and official.
This is a 1-unit play for me, and I like New Orleans +3. I mean, this goes back to what I was talking about in week 1, divisional home dogs. Now they were 2-0 against the spread last week. Now 22-5-1 in the last 27 outcomes in this one. So you have Tampa coming off Sunday Night Football primetime win 19-3. Kind of lackluster game altogether. They only had 195 yards passing, which is kind of not typical for a Tom Brady type of style. So maybe he's getting a little bit older and he's feeling that age. Maybe that rotator cuffs get a little bit sore. But, New Orleans coming off, they kind of played flat in the first half of the game. And then you kind of started seeing the team kind of pick up and, gather around each other in the fourth quarter. They put up 17 points in the fourth quarter to get a dramatic win, 27-26. So I know that saved a lot of people who had them in Survivor for sure. I think that's going to carry over into this game. And you actually look at Tom Brady, and you mentioned how he's done at Tampa at New Orleans, but this all goes back to how he's done with the Patriots as well. It's like he's always really struggled in this stadium. And I think this is going to kind of carry over. And I know there's like this double revenge. I guess it'd be quadruple revenge at this point, which is another key trend. But I think this is going to be one of those situations that New Orleans is kind of on the rise. I think the momentum from the fourth quarter is going to kind of carry over in this game. And I just didn't see anything from Tampa in the game other than Dallas basically losing the quarterback, having Cooper Rush come in. Things were kind of getting skewed offensively for him. And I think this New Orleans team is just a lot better in this spot. So I think the line steamed down to +2, +2.5. I actually would sprinkle them on the money line if at that point, because I think they're going to win this game outright. But I got them at +3 for protection. That's a 1-unit play for me.
This is probably one of the few that we disagreed on, and I don't have a ton on Tampa. It is scary, and you obviously pointed out a lot more in-depth analysis, but there are a lot of people out there just pointing to he's lost 4 straight in against the Saints. He can never win there. What would worry me more is that offensive line and some of the things that actually held up pretty well against Dallas. So we'll see how Tampa does. It's hard to think you can keep Tom Brady and those feisty Bucks down, but that's a game I definitely want to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And, obviously we're crossing a lot of great points for either side of this game, which for me makes it a difficult cap. My initial lean was New Orleans because, again, this is not so much other sports where regression comes. When something is what it is, oftentimes that is always what it is in pro football, and it does not go to a different average, which would, of course, suggest New Orleans does own him with the Bucks. And one final point, New Orleans, we don't know how much they looked ahead. We weren't in the locker room, but we do our best to psychoanalyze what's going on. You go back to last week on the road, they laid an absolute egg. The Falcons were very fortunate to come away with a victory there at the buzzer. But that was a lackluster game. It was a divisional game. It was a look-ahead game. So if you're willing to call that a look-ahead game, theoretically, they were looking ahead to week 2 against Tom Brady, which would suggest by the Saints here. So no play for me. Official from the gun. New Orleans +3, 2.5 now. I think we're solid on that hook split regardless. Next play, we are going to Detroit. This is an official play in the Circa Millions competition, which of course is myself, Odds Fellow, Old Man Who Bets, and the great Fusini. We are not putting this officially on Twitter. As I said last week, we have to put out 5 plays for the competition. We're not always financially betting it ourselves outside of the competition. I'm not on this, but this is one of our 5 plays. I'm going to throw it to Anthony here for some initial comments, and then I'll jump off it.
Yeah, so I did grab it in our Slack, the Dad Bods Slack, little plug there, free to join community. We really want to grow it. We want the chatter as much as the picks. The picks are there, but it's really about the fun and the interaction and the learning, and it's been a great environment. So little plug for there. I did post it at -1.5. Looks like it's coming down a little bit. I like the Lions at home again. They really fought well, and obviously, I think coming into the year, everyone's worried. What's Dan Campbell all about? What's this roster all about? Do you Knox bump? For me here, it's really just being lower on the Commanders. I can't believe I got that name right, but we did. Carson Wentz, they battled, they came back. I do think Jacksonville kind of gave that game away. The real key for me, if you look at the box score and you looked at that game flow, Jacksonville was able to run the ball on Washington, and that's what Detroit wants to do here. They're going to run the ball just like they did against Philadelphia. They're going to run it well. Hopefully they can keep Carson Wentz in check, and I do think they get it done at home. Small number to cover. Nice way for them. You don't want to and start your season 0-2 and 0-2 at home. So if they do want to start turning this thing around, right, big mental edge, Dan Campbell, leader of men, let's get him going, and let's get this win for the Lions.
Yeah, I agree. As I said, 5 plays. This is probably the least favorite of the group for us. But you have to go back to last year. And I mean, this is a snapshot to sports handicapping versus sports fandom and general entertainment. This team last year was absolutely abysmal winning football games. However, they were 6-2 ATS at home. The ATS market is vastly and oftentimes polar opposite to to money line efficiency. And of course, they did cover in week 1 a backdoor 14 points in the fourth quarter. That's been a situation we've seen numerous times from the Goff Campbell Lions. Goff and the Rams. Get in the mind straight. Shark, talk. But this is what they've always done. They come out flat and this and that. This is the first time they've been favored at home, I believe, in 3 years. It's showing significant strength.
And that's a really interesting tell, right? You know, that strength, obviously, for a long time. This is a franchise that has really struggled to get going for a long time.
Absolutely. And you look at the other side of this game, of course, the Commanders did just beat Jacksonville. I'm not sure how representative that is of long-term quality in this campaign. And a bit of a look ahead. Jay and I were talking about this the other day. Next week, Commanders get at Philly in the division. And, of course, Carson Wentz going back to where he began his career. And then in week 4 at Dallas. So you get a home win, which was good for them, a needed win. Now you get a trap on the road as an underdog against the Lions, who need a win. And final point on this, the Lions did win the last 3 games at home last year. Straight up, Minnesota, Arizona, and Green Bay. This team can win at home. They should win at home today. We're at -1. It's pick 'em now. It hovered all week, and that's all we're going to say on that. Next game, we are going 1 p.m. TIAA Bank Field, North Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. Stand up. 0-1 Jags hosting the Colts. Guns picks +4 an official.
Listen, it goes right back to the divisional home dog trends. We're really hitting to the well, and I'm going with it once again. Listen, I got him at +4, and that line is available as Friday. Now, it was available yesterday. It's dropped to 3. Still good at 3. I would still take it at 3 as long as it drops past that. I'd probably not consider it as much. But, you have Jacksonville with their first home game of the season, second, but you have Indianapolis on a back-to-back road games, divisional games for that matter. So very tough. Even though you're playing the Houston Texans, even though you're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, these are key games in the NFL. And when you actually look at the stats on this one, Indianapolis ended up in a tie, even though they won the net yardage by putting up 300 and I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong stat here. So basically, they dominated the game from the statistical standpoint. It's plus 218 net yards in that game. So and it was more predicated a little bit on the run with Jonathan Taylor. But then I went and looked at how they do Jacksonville does against the rush. They actually don't do too bad. They only gave up 3 yards per carry to the the Commanders. Ooh, almost got canceled there. But even if you go back to last year, in the beginning of the season, the first half of the season, they only gave up like 1 or 2 100-yard rushers early on, and they kind of fell off at the back half. But, Urban Meyer situation, the team was kind of in shambles. They're a little bit more put together on this one. I liked what the offense produced. They put up 383 yards of total offense last week versus the Commanders in the loss. They're playing their first game at home. And actually, if you actually look at this matchup altogether, I found this kind of astounding. Jacksonville is 13-1 against the spread versus Indianapolis in the last 14, dating back to 2015. I got to go to the well here and stay with Jacksonville. I got them at +4. I like the number there. But hell, if it's at +3 right now, buy it because it's still a good number.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about this the other day, but that stat stands for itself. And it's what I just said a couple minutes ago. When trends exist, particularly divisional trends, oftentimes they're not regressing to a different average, particularly when that's a 14-ball game sample. And you go back to last week, I mean, the Colts looked very, very lackluster. They did come back in the fourth quarter to get the tie at Houston, of course, 7-point favorites, team down from 8.5 at open. But that was incredibly unimpressive. Frank Reich, Matt Ryan, obviously ex-Super Bowl quarterback in the biggest collapse of all time. We don't know how good this guy is, and we don't know how he fits into this scheme. So we've seen one game. Our sample size is one game, which makes it hard to evaluate. That could have been a total outlier, week 1, trap spot on the road, whatever, and then they turn up here. Or this just could be what this team is going to be this year. And, when you go to North Florida, I said this on Thursday with Jay, last year, it's a little bit of a different environment, but Aaron Rodgers opened the campaign in a displaced game in Jacksonville against New Orleans. And the Packers got absolutely smoked 38-3. This is not Miami. This is not humidity. This is not glamour and tourism. but North Florida has a certain vibe to it. And it kind of reminds me of NBA players traveling to Utah. They just don't, the environment is funky. It's not inspirational. It's not a big town, really. And it's a tough spot to travel. And I think Jacksonville gets behind their fans down there. It's grungy, and they're ready to go. It's a tough travel spot for the Colts here today. Anthony, anything on this one, or should we move on?
No, let's move on. That's where I lean. Tough to back the Colts until they figure out what Matt Ryan. I mean, I think for them, then I'll shut up. It's really just you can't keep plugging quarterbacks into this system, into this roster, and hope it works. And I think that's been a struggle, right?
Yeah. Let's stay at 1 o'clock. We have 2 more 1 o'clock games. These are both unofficial plays. We give a little loose commentary before we go to the 4 o'clock slate. Giants come home off a very impressive road win, which we had officially last week, of course, at +6.5. An outright win, we will take it. And they come home, and they were obviously incredibly enthused. Dable and the guys in the locker room, people were saying they were over-celebrating. I'll say this. If a team wins their first road game of the year with a new coach and they don't celebrate, something is wrong with the emotional makeup of the group. And the media will overblow this. This is not Patrick Beverly on the tables after winning a play-in game. This is a team, pro football, leatherhead football. It's hard to win games. You only get 17 opportunities per 365. This is not an overblown celebration. And I think the media really kind of took that out of context and said these guys are unprofessional. They're too high. No, you can celebrate a win in pro football, particularly in that context. So you come home, you get Baker Mayfield coming in here. Panthers came in here last year and got absolutely hammered 25-3. The line is telling us a story here. Last year, Carolina did lay 3 points on the road and get blown out by 22. Now they open up at a 3-point dog. This is getting steamed the other direction. Giants are -1 now. Last year, of course, with a different coach, the Giants early season were very good on the road and were not good at home. They had trouble traveling off-road success coming home. Couldn't back up success with success, if you will, which is hard to do in real life and in the NFL. I lean Giants here today. I think there's going to be some momentum. I think Dable's a very real thing. And I think Baker Mayfield is just pedestrian. And I think he will go down to history as one of those number 1 picks that just really was overdrafted probably by 10 to 20 picks. Anthony, comments?
Yeah, really tough game for me. I think, Carolina obviously came away with the loss. They actually played pretty well against a deep, Cleveland Browns team. How much of that was motivational factor for Baker and maybe them getting going early on? I don't know. But I think the Giants culture, you can feel that tide kind of changing. The one thing to watch here, maybe a little bit of a look-ahead spot to that Monday Night Football game against the Cowboys, knowing they don't have Dak. They're a team that historically has beat up on them in that division. So do the Giants look ahead? Hopefully not, for their sake and their fans, knowing they can probably get Dallas and maybe the division in a stronger spot moving forward. They got to take care of business today. First, we'll really see, I think, some of the makeup, maybe depth of this team. Saquon's going to be fun to watch no matter what, though. Great to see him and McCaffrey actually healthy. It is only week 2 and on the field. So we'll see how that goes.
Guns, anything on this, or should we go forward?
I mean, they won the game last week. They celebrated like they won the Super Bowl. I mean, there's a little bit of a kumbaya moment, so that is a little bit of concern with me. But when I looked at the stats on this one, they basically they had the worst. They look like the old Giants in the first half, and then they look like a totally different team in the second half. They put up 21 points, found a way to get the victory, and they dominated the rushing game. Having Saquon Barkley 100% healthy in that lineup is going to be a key point throughout the whole season. If they can keep him healthy, that's going to be a different team, a little bit more competitive team. I need to see a little bit more out of Danny Dimes, obviously, but I think as long as they can pound the ground and get the yak yardage that way, and then have their defense kind of like carry that momentum over. I'm just not going to be high on the Panthers. If there's a lean you got to be taking the Giants here, and let's see if they change their season around and actually win games instead of being one of the worst teams in the past like 4 or 5 years, like them and the Jets.
Yeah. And one final point, I made the comment last week. You saw how that game went down last week, the Carolina versus Cleveland game. It was back and forth in the final 3 minutes of the game. I have a feeling that the Giants and the Panthers all year will be in that environment. Very tight games down the stretch and very tight games against the ATS number. These are 2 teams that you really want to situationally buy, not when they're playing each other on effectively a pick-em one-possession line. It's tough stuff. We'll leave it at that. 1 o'clock, we're going down to Baltimore. Baltimore Ravens come home off the aforementioned win and cover for us last weekend at the Jets, and they catch the Dolphins. The Dolphins are surprisingly, when I looked at the data on this, I was like, are the Dolphins really 9-1 in their last 10 ball games? They are. And you go back to the beginning of this streak, I believe it was the second game of this streak last year. Miami did hammer Baltimore down in Miami, the aforementioned elusive environment in Miami, 22-10. Lamar Jackson, contract, bunch of things going on. Anthony, comments?
I think the revenge factor is a little bit interesting here. You got two merges, though. I don't think Miami played as well as that box score might have looked against the Pats. They probably should have put the Pats team out 40-7, 40-10. They did not, right? Mostly because they couldn't get going on offense. Now you insert a better Baltimore defense. One, I think that is getting healthier on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. The concern for Baltimore is their offense didn't look great against the Jets necessarily. They still got the cover, but maybe not as explosive as you thought against especially young Jets secondary and a lot of rookies scattered throughout that team. So a lot of merge for me. The revenge spot is interesting, but that also brings with it, a good scheme. Now that was a Brian Flores, a lot of cover zero. They really gave Lamar fits. And when you look at that 9-1, breakdown, besides maybe the Pats win here, the Ravens win last year, not a lot of great teams in that run that Miami had. This is really a big test for Miami. We'll see what they get up. I have a slight lean to the Ravens. I just think better depth, better scheme, a little bit more of the revenge factor this year, but nothing official, slight lean Ravens.
Yeah, Guns.
I have to agree with that one. I think it's Ravens or pass on this one. I really think that you got the revenge factor in there. I really didn't like anything that Miami's bringing to the table. They were favored 3.5 at home, and now they're 3.5, 4-point dog on the road. Good road test for them. It's just, I think it's going to be a different dynamic. The defense is probably better for the Ravens, and the odds fellow just brought up a great point. This team was not healthy last year. So if you're looking at 2021 stats, their defense was completely depleted. Their whole running core was completely depleted. I think you're going to see, I honestly really like the Ravens kind of on this one for a lean. It's not an official play for me, obviously, but if there's any play to take on this one, it's Ravens or pass.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the revenge game stands for itself. The line is a little short, a lot of merge. And again, these 3.5 lines are very, very tough. Two playoff caliber teams right outside of a field goal. It's a gamble spot. But of course, we know a lot of guys have office pools, free plays, this, and that. So we want to give you a link. I know everybody sometimes needs an angle for every game, even if you're not betting it yourself. So staying with the course, 4 o'clock, we're going to the West Coast. Top plays are developing, and we will be dropping them now. Guns picks, we're going to go to you first. San Francisco 49ers come home here off a really abysmal 19-10 loss. Trey Lance starting in the rain. Monsoon, Chicago, Soldier Field. Comes home, Levi's Stadium. I believe Kittle is out for a second consecutive game. However, San Francisco catches the Seattle Seahawks off one of the most egregious misrepresented wins in recent history in the NFL. A huge high coming on the road in the division. Guns picks, an official play.
Well, I guess you've kind of figured out how you beat the 49ers if you're a bad team. You bring in a monsoon and you make your whole entire field a swamp. I think what you saw from the 49ers last week, especially from the offensive end, is not what you're going to see out of them today. And then you have Seattle on the other side coming off a big win over Denver with Russell Wilson coming back to the stadium. I don't really like that at all because when you actually look at the box score, keep bringing up the box score, minus 180 net yards Seattle was, and they won by a point. So you had a bunch of key fumbles in the second half at the goal line for Denver. You had completely bad clock management towards the end of the game. There was a bunch of outliers that kind of affected the outcome of that game. So for Seattle to actually not only just win the game, but to cover the game, I thought there was enough elements in there that they probably shouldn't have done either. I think a lot of people are too high on Geno Smith, which just sounds absurd to me. High on Geno Smith is like a hubcap on a tractor to me. I mean, this doesn't make sense. So you have San Francisco's defense. They held Chicago to 204 yards of total offense last week, 2.7 yards per carry on the ground, and this was in the slop, by the way. 11.8 sack rate too, so they're going to be able to put pressure on Seattle. They had a 9% sack rate last year. That defense is awesome with Nick Bosa and that defensive line. They're going to have fits, and I know that historically you can look at the trends, and Seattle does cover a lot versus the 49ers, but guess who's not there anymore? Russell Wilson. Okay, those are all predicated on Russell Wilson being there for years, so I'm not going to take any against the spread matchups with this one to account. I'm throwing that right out the window. You have San Francisco coming off a bad loss in a bad weather game. They're coming home. They're getting -9, which is key here. And I think this is going to be one of those Seattle teams that is going to be a public dog. And public dogs have fleas, in my opinion. That's what I always say. So I like San Francisco to bounce back here and actually probably blow out Seattle.
Yeah, and I think that's a snapshot to what we're looking at in this week 2 board. Very unique stuff. 6 out of the final 8 games on this card going through Monday night have a spread at open higher than 8.5. That is unheard of in professional football. Professional football, you're always seeing lines between pick'em and 7. When you get over 8.5, 9, 10, it tells you a story, a blowout story in a league that is parity driven, and blowouts are rare. This is not college football. And when you see these environments developing here today, San Francisco, Denver, and the Rams, you are finding spots, all world collide type of spots, where you're getting a contender style team projected to be deep in the playoffs off a bad loss. All 3 of these teams, Denver, Rams, and San Francisco, they didn't just lose last week. They had insulting losses. Their quality was checked real quick. And you get opponents who are all bottom feeders coming off of wins and impressive environments, 2 out of the 3 in the division. It's great stuff, and we'll segue to the next play. The odds fellow, SoFi Stadium, bounce back campaign begins this afternoon, -10, LA Rams.
It's a lot of what you just laid out. I mean, the only difference here is who the Rams played against week 1, I think does matter, right? All these other teams that we're talking about, really down opponents, teams that you talked about, Bears, Seahawks, potential worst records in the league, potential first coach is fired, quarterback shuffle, rebuilding years, not a lot of talent, right? That's not the case with the Bills. The Rams had to open the season. You get a little bit, maybe the Super Bowl hangover coupled with that. So it's, again, that perfect, buy low for them. That line was that strength. It's not 7.5, 8.5. It's all the way up to 10. And I think that speaks to what the Rams need to come out here and do to get themselves back on track. Stafford proved that he looks okay. So I don't think it's necessarily a health issue with him. I just think they ran into a motivated buzzsaw that was the Buffalo Bills in week 1. So I like the Rams, 10 and up. They're going to get it done.
Yeah, and of course, another snapshot point here is when you guys are tailing our plays and watching our show, which of course we appreciate you guys immensely. We know there's 10, 15, 5,000 options to watch on a Sunday morning. We appreciate you watching our show. It is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle, ride the way out of the water. But you go back to last week and you look at what happened. Buffalo is just the pure class of the league. We're not talking about AFC or NFC, the entire sport, probably the favorite to win the Super Bowl. And they sure showed it. We had a 2-unit play on Thursday Night Football. Now we buy low on the team we faded last week, and it's a handicapping point, zigzag effect. You want to buy and sell teams in and out of weeks accordingly. And you go back to last year, it's very important stuff. Of course, the Rams did win the Super Bowl last year, so week 1 was a hangover spot for them, and they certainly were notably hungover. But if you go back to last year, the Rams only lost 5 ball games. And if you really look at 3 particular home spots last year against bottom feeder style teams, they were 2-1 ATS. They opened the season last year on Sunday, September 12th against Chicago, 34-14, 20-point blowout. Later on, they came off a road sequence, win at Seattle, big high, travel to New York, tough travel, road back-to-back, blow out the Giants, another high, and then they came home and faced Detroit, who was incredibly lackluster, as we noted before, and did not cover 28-19. So we can throw that out. That is not this environment. We go to the most applicable environment we have here with this team. Last year, Sunday, December 5th, they came in off a road loss at Green Bay, and they got Jacksonville, and they laid double-digit points, and they beat Jacksonville 37-7. I'm not saying this game today is going to be 37-7 or a 30-point blowout, but this game has 14-17 towards 20 written all over it. And the other point in this game, you look at the other side of this, you get the Falcons traveling across country off an incredibly tight, tough loss at home in the division to Atlanta. This is brutal travel for a team that has low expectations, journeyman quarterback, and really is coming off of a situational high. All boxes checked, LA Rams -10. Anthony, going back to you, we're going to Las Vegas, and we know we got a lot of people from Vegas here probably going to the game, Allegiant Stadium. It's going to be a hell of a fucking game this afternoon. And it's going to be a game to watch and a game to bet. We are adding an official play right now. Anthony, talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're talking about a Cardinals team that did not look good week one. On the defensive side of the ball, they do struggle. How do they get that right? I think it starts actually on the offense. The offense has to do more. They ran into the Chiefs, an absolute offensive buzzsaw. So I think that, kind of extrapolates things a little bit for what they're seeing. You get the other side where Vegas stayed in the game. They stayed in the game against the Chargers, but 5.5 to me is big. It's reactionary. It's a number there that I think speaks to how poor the Cardinals looked. A team that historically, and we talked about it last week, has come out the gate the first half of the last 2 seasons with Cliff and with Kyler a little bit better. So I like this game to be much closer. I like the Cardinals offense to get going. And I think 5.5 is just, too much.
Yeah. And this is the 5th play in the competition for us. And we are putting actual US dollars on this. So this is an official play. This is the one I said I was going to drop, which people had not heard me drop before. Official play, 1 unit, Arizona Cardinals plus 5.5. And you have to look at what Anthony said. Jump off and look at the context of week one. We just talked about how the Rams got hammered by the Bills. Cardinals got hammered by the Chiefs. This is a very unique environment. And now they come on the road, and you have to go back to last year. As Anthony mentioned, this team did start 7-0 last year and cratered down the stretch, of course, culminating with a blowout wild card loss, 34-11 at the Rams. But after the 7-0 start, trends started to develop. And the most noteworthy trend is their functionality on the road ATS coming off of a home loss the previous week. You go back to last year, late season, they were 3-1 straight up and 3-1 ATS on the road off of a home loss. Going a little bit deeper into their calendar last year, this team was 8-1 ATS on the road. They were also 3-0 ATS and straight up at the AFC, out of division, out of conference. And they were 5-1 ATS on the road outside of the division. And of course, there have been some moving parts. DeAndre Hopkins, of course, suspended. He was injured at one point last year. He was not always in the lineup. Kyler Murray moves the ball around well. He has to get pissed off. We talk about this a lot of times in other sports too. Certain teams have to get their ass beat before they turn up. They can't just self-generate. It seems like that's kind of who Arizona has become. After winning 7 in a row, they got a little lackluster. Now they're a bounce-back team, and you get a bounce-back effect here. And you look at the Raiders coming home. Of course, Josh McDaniels' first home game as head coach. Last week looked lackluster. I mean, you go back to what Josh McDaniels did prior with Denver. It's kind of like we talked about Dennis Allen with New Orleans. Not a great coach with Oakland. Now is he going to be a great coach with the Saints? Josh McDaniels made a living as an offensive coordinator, not a motivator of a locker room, not the biggest voice in the room. It's a totally different energy and position. It's not schematically driven. And you saw last week, I mean, the Chargers are a classy team. Chargers were in control of that game. They come home, tight game, divisional, real playoff style game. It's hard to back up that effort with another effort. I think you're going to see a higher scoring game tonight. And I think you're going to see a tight game. And I think at plus 5.5, you are really in a nice buy zone where ultimately the 3-point against the money line is probably where this game is going to end up. So official play, 1 unit, Arizona Cardinals on the road in Las Vegas, plus 5.5. Next play, Guns picks. Denver Broncos come home off an inexplicable, confusing, absolutely unprofessional loss. And this was the quarterback. This was the head coach. This was the emotional environment. It was 100 other things. However, the Gun, 4:25 p.m., Mile High Air, Empower Field, an official play.
It's going by. We've been kind of reiterating the same thing. You have these good teams coming off a bad loss, but I told you got to open up the box score to see what the outcome was. I did tell you about the Denver and Seattle outcome. It's like basically Denver dominated from the net yard average, but the turnovers really killed them, especially in red zone situations. Now you look at the Houston side. Of course, Houston coming off the tie, 20-20, absolutely dominated, minus 218 net yard average for the game, and they gave up 517 yards of total offense to the Indianapolis Colts with a new quarterback in Matt Ryan. So that tells you a little bit something. Matt Ryan, I don't think he's gelled with that team. Also, you got to put into a key point. The Denver starters, that was the first time they had real game action. They didn't really play a lot in the preseason. So there was a lot of bit of rust and wear there. And then you have to get that out of your system in Seattle with a decibel level at highs of highs. No one can hear each other. Russell Wilson was struggling to get calls to his offensive linemen. He's not going to have that problem in Mile High Stadium because he's at home. So you have a really good bounce back spot for Denver. You have a Houston team. Basically, I don't know. That's like a moral victory, I guess, over Indianapolis getting a tie. But there's nothing in the Houston offense that really struck me as productive at any point in that game, obviously by the net yards that were shown. So you have Denver -10. The line is telling you a story. This is a Denver absolute blowout situation. I got a 1 unit on it, and I think you're really going to see who Denver is today, especially playing a inferior opponent.
This team has a 0.00 percentage in the red zone offensively because they turned it over twice. They settled for field goals. The only touchdown that they scored was a 40-50 bomb. Obviously outside of the red zone. So 2 turnovers in the red zone. I think they correct that. They get right. I'm also on, just a little sprinkle here, the team total under for the Houston Texans, kind of what Guns alluded to. I got that at 17.5. I would play it down to that 16-17 if it's moved at all. I just think you're going to get, again, the spread, the total are telling you a lot of things here. And I like Denver to get it done. And I like, Houston to stay deflated.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We talk about the relationship between a spread and a total. When you see a double-digit line and a total at 45.5, they're telling you a lot of things, but one thing they're really telling you specifically, Houston's going to have a tough time scoring the football here today. And you go back to last year, Davis Mills, 4 road games, only 15 combined points in those 4 games, 4 blowouts, 40-0 at the Bills, 31-3 at Indy, 31-5 at Arizona, and 23-7 at San Francisco. And as I mentioned on a video I did, I'm just going to jump off here for 20 seconds. This is really one of those spots that you look for in sports betting across a 365 window. It's when you find a team that laid an inexplicable egg on the road, lack of professionalism, lack of quality, lack of execution, comes home, lays a huge figure for historical points in week 2, particularly out of division. And you get the opponent coming in here off a huge high, a big divisional cover at home, traveling to altitude. This is a blowout waiting to happen. 2 unit special, Denver -10. Final play, we're going 8:20 p.m., NBC Sports, Lambeau Field, 2 unit special per the Shark, Chicago, Green Bay under 42, 2 units. And again, you have to go back to last year for this one. 2 matchups last year. First matchup last year was at Soldier Field, 24-14 Packers. 38 points. Fine. Normal. Second one at Lambeau, 45-30, 75 points. What is this, the Big 12 in September? I mean, you look at the box score, you would have thought it was. 45 points. 45 points were scored in the second quarter alone.
You never see that in an NFL game. Never.
Unbelievable. And you had a pick 6, 55-yarder. You had a punt return, 97-yard return. And you had 3 passing touchdowns over 38 yards. It was the highest scoring quarter of the entire season in the NFL. So now you get a game line lower than what they scored in 1 quarter last year. This is telling you an incredible story. And you have to go back to week 1. You guys saw Justin Fields and the boys against the Niners. Not a lot of offense. You saw Aaron Rodgers in the division on the road. No Devontae Adams, sketchiness with the receivers, lack of relationships, not a lot of offense. And you have an improved Green Bay defense. You have Chicago playing how Chicago has played since the beginning of the creation of pro football, which is a defensive style of football. This is an under waiting to happen. The numbers on it, the dynamics on it on both sides. Under 42 this is already steamed down to 41.5. I think throughout the day, this might get steamed down further. Get it now at 41.5. This game should finish under 38 points.
Definitely grab it before it goes to that 41 spot. That's a key number in totals. It might seem like it's not, but it is where a lot of these NFL games land. So try to stay above that 41 mark if you can. Another way I bet this thing too is I also grabbed, again, keeping with the theme of some of these bad teams coming off high spots, I grabbed the Bears team total as well as that total full game under, because I think if anything, the Packers maybe can get going a little bit. But what I really don't expect is some of those broken plays and the way that the Bears scored last week. It was bad weather. Justin Fields only had about 100 yards passing. Maybe they do get a little bit more going on the ground, but I just don't think, I have that number at 15.5 at plus 100. I don't think they're going over 2 scores, whether that's a combination of a couple field goals and a touchdown. I see them in the 10 to 13, 10 to 14 range.
Yeah, completely agreed. And last game on the card, we were going to drop it, but we'll talk about it for a second because it's the fandom point for my man, the odds fellow. Dallas Cowboys, 425, Arlington, Texas. This is the Backwood Grease Fire special. We didn't think it would be, but it is. No Dak.
We thought we were getting Joey Burrow versus Dak, baby.
Insert Cooper Rush, journeyman out of Central Michigan, now in Dallas. Just signed, I believe, officially this week. Had a couple starts last year, 1 or 2, I believe. This is a weird line. -7 versus Cooper Rush and Dallas for, again, a Cincinnati team that theoretically should be motivated off a loss last week. But sometimes these Super Bowl hangovers can last a month. It's not just an auto bounce back. Comments from the odds fellow.
Look, Cooper Rush has won a game. He beat the Minnesota Vikings last year. He's been around this Dallas team for a long time. What you hope is they simplify the offense, they get back to basics, they run the ball, and the defense steps up. If you get some more Burrow turnovers like he had last week, maybe Dallas fights in this one. The sharp look is probably actually the Cowboys and the points, which is a little insane to say and think. I'm not officially on it. That is a lean at that number. Really telling here, really interesting, and probably a little bit too overreactionary based on the rest of the depth and the talent of this team. That line opened at Dallas -2. Look ahead, before the season started. It is now a full 9.5 point swing, which is absurd when you think about what a quarterback is worth to a team and that type of line. Interesting tell right there. Slight lean for me. Would love to hear what you guys think about it.
Yeah, Guns.
Yeah, I'd probably lean Dallas on this one, and it's all predicated on the offensive line versus the defensive line. Now, you saw Joe Burrow struggle last week. I mean, he was getting the pressure, and that really caused a lot of the turnovers. I know they made a lot of changes in the offensive line, going to free agency, signing new guys, and trying to improve it, but I didn't really see that last week. And they got to play another good defensive line that actually put great pressure on Tom Brady last week. Tom Brady didn't really have that many passing yards because he was getting rushed in certain spots where he couldn't get the ball out of his hands. And you may see that in the same situation with Joe Burrow here. I think the Super Bowl hangover will still carry over. You're getting 7 in a hook. The problem that I have with this is I don't really know much about Cooper Rush other than what he did last week. He actually had better statistics than Dak Prescott once he got into the game. But I need to see what they do offensively. That I really don't trust. I don't really like the head coaching situation over there as well. That's kind of like a key factor why I'm just going to stay off this game. It makes me believe that they may have too many 3 and outs and the defense gets gassed. And then you could see a Cincinnati Bengals team absolutely explode on them, especially coming off a tough loss last week in overtime. So I lean Dallas, but it's not a game that I want to play.
Yeah, and I think you have to go back to last year. I think people quickly get fooled oftentimes by a team that went to the Super Bowl because oftentimes in pro football, you can catch a heater and really just get there. And that doesn't happen in other sports. Other sports, you have to win a 7-game series. It's rare that the worst team wins a 7-game series. But in one-off playoff football, anything can happen. And you saw it last January at Kansas City, 27-24 in overtime. Kansas City is the better football team. They just hit a wall after they had just played a ridiculous game against Buffalo the previous week. But if you go back to the regular season last year, just briefly, you have to remember Cincinnati was 5-4 after 9 games. And they had just lost 2 games in a row to the Jets and Cleveland. And if you really go back to last year on the road early season, this is kind of what we're looking at right here. They opened last season with a 27-24 OT game against Minnesota. They just opened the season and went to overtime. Then they go on the road outside of the division to the NFC. They lost 20-17 to Chicago. Just to give you a snapshot of what's going on here. This is not an early season football team. Joe Burrow already in the early point of his career is noted as being a comeback artist. It's just who he is, his mental makeup. They don't come out and juice it up. This team is in a trap spot tonight. And again, if you go back to last season, 5-4 before their bye week, road loss at Chicago, road loss at the New York Jets. This team is very, very capable of laying a road egg. So just be careful of that. And it's going to be the chalk special. I was just looking at ESPN. I see articles written about how Bengals money line is the spot of the week. And it's just the ultimate level of poor handicapping and really not looking at deep analytics of what's going on here.
Going back on that point, I guarantee every teaser card on the planet in the Vegas books will have Cincinnati on it, especially with that number at 7.5. That is going to be one of the liabilities of the week. That's, in my opinion, I think you're going to see that on a lot of teaser cards.
And you better believe that survivor pools are probably extremely heavy with Cincinnati today too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
the survivor pools got decimated in week 1, so tread lightly.
Yeah, because they took the Bengals.
Yeah. And you just have to remember, again, go back through the actual calendar. Forget the heater in the playoffs. You have to remember Eli Manning had 2 isolated playoff runs for 2 Super Bowl titles, who was otherwise a very pedestrian regular season quarterback his entire career. And again, Joe Burrow, very beginning of his arc here, it's very possible Joe Burrow becomes that guy who every single season starts out slow, and then they get in their flow and they become a late November, December, January team. So nothing official there, but this is very important stuff to note. As most people look for the obvious way out, the obvious way out in sports betting is the losing way out. And speaking of winning, let's dominate today. Top 5 plays for me. New England -2 at 1 o'clock. Rams -10. Denver 2-unit special -10. Arizona +5.5. Just added that. And late night 2-unit special total under 42 at Lambeau. Odds fellow, all the same plays in the competition. New England, Pittsburgh under 40.5. Jets under 39.5. The gun, New England 3-way collab. New Orleans against Tom Brady +3. Jacksonville down in the hole there in Jacksonville +4. San Francisco bounce back 9. Denver -10. 53 minutes in the books. Circa Millions Sunday show, week 2. Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. Thank you, Anthony, for coming on. He's about to head to JFK Airport and get on a flight. We wish him well. Guns, picks, closing words, and let's dominate.
Hey, thanks for everybody that's joined us. We had almost 300 plus on Twitter. We had 23 to 30 on YouTube, so we're growing there. Go check us on the YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment. We read the comments. I'll share them on the air if you got any good ones. So don't be afraid to say what's up or just say like I like this play. What do you think? That's kind of like what we're looking for. We're looking like full blown engagement. So don't be afraid to share your information or share your comments. So please like, subscribe to us. We will be here every week. See you next Sunday at 10 a.m. Till next time, let's go cash some tickets. And as always, let's keep dancing. Peace.
Good luck, all.